A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to warmly welcome you to the Centenary webinar of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka reaches a historic milestone today with the conducting of 100 webinars, now conducted 4 times a week. As you know, the English webinar service is conducted every Saturday at 5:30 p.m. and has now concluded 56 webinars. Then we have the Sinhala webinar series every Tuesday at 7 p.m., which has completed 26 webinars. The Tabian webinar series is held every Thursday at 7 p.m. and will be reaching 10 webinars next week. And the fourth series, that is the Professional, Personal and Career Development webinar series, completes 10 webinars today, making up the 100 webinars now held. In a time where social distancing and work from home have become the norm, this series of webinars brought to you by the Bar Association of Sri Lanka have been nothing short of informative and a source of learning. The BASL webinar series, being the brainchild of our dynamic secretary of the Bar Association, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, was conducted last year under his office as secretary, and this year is organized by the seminars committee of the BASL, also chaired by Mr. Amarasuriya, with the convener assistant secretary, Mr. Pasindu Silva, and the co-conveners, Mr. Pandula Vanniyarachi, Mr. Oshan Ubeyaratna, Ms. Anne Devananda, and Ms. Nikini Mapitigama. Conducting 4 weekly series has been no easy task. It requires meticulous planning, including putting together an eminent panel of experts in the area of law, conducting technical trial sessions, coordinating with expert panelists, moderators, and compeers. Promotional work and real-time technical problem solving are only some of the efforts made behind the scenes of each webinar. And this success, of course, would not have been possible if not for the hard work and the meticulous coordinating and planning by the Secretary's Office and also the Seminars Committee of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. I would like to take this opportunity to specially thank the BASL and particularly the Chairman of the Seminars Committee, BASL Secretary, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, the Convener of the Seminars Committee, BASL Assistant Secretary, Mr. Pasindu Silva, and the co-conveners, Mr. Pandula Vanniyarachi, Mr. Oshan Ubeyaratna, Ms. Anne Devananda, and Ms. Nikini Mapitigama. I would also take this opportunity to thank the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Salia Piris, President's Council, immediate past President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Kalinga Indatissa, President's Council, and the other members of the 2 management committees of the BASL for all their support and guidance given. Throughout these past few months, we've seen some of the most brilliant legal minds in the country share with you their knowledge and experiences. Today is no different, but the focus of the webinar is slightly different in celebration of the Centenary webinar. The topic for discussion today is the multifaceted legal sphere, reaching the pinnacle. Before we proceed, however, I would like to invite Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, the Secretary of the BASL and the Chairman of the Seminars Committee, to share his thoughts on reaching 100 webinars. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Josh. A very warm welcome to all of you this evening to this centenary webinar of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. When we launched this webinar series last year on 9th of May 2020, then BASL President, Mr. Kalinga Indatissa, President's Council, said that it was a historic day for the BASL. Today, 15 months down the line, I believe, we have reached yet another historic day for the BASL when we reached the completion of 100 webinars. It was no easy task in completing these 100 webinars, now held 4 times weekly and conducted in all 3 languages, English, Sinhala and Tamil. And we could not have achieved this success if not for the contribution and support of over 300 resource persons we have had. I must also make special mention of the support I received from the BSL President, Mrs. Alia Piris, President's Council, as well as past President, Ms. Kalingi, that is the President's Council, and the management committees of both last year and this year. And of course, our Assistant Secretary, Mr. Pasanda Silva, and Ms. Ann Devananda, who supported the series from the very inception. In addition, we had the energetic involvement and support of Mr. Pandula Vanyarachi, Mr. Oshana Beratna, and Ms. Nikini Mapitigama, who are the co-conveners of the seminars committee this year. Thank you also to Mrs. Indika Naganathan, Ms. Nalini Manatunga, and the Women Lawyers Professional and Career Development Committee for organizing, together with the seminars committee, the alternate Sunday webinar. And thank you also goes out to Mr. Puvidaran, President's Council, for all the guidance given in respect to the Tamil webinar series. I must also recognize and thank the many compeers we have had, all of whom are young attorneys at law. Also Saranga, Ishani, and our CEO, Surani, of the BSL staff. I don't want to take any further time as we have an enthralling webinar to look forward to, but only some concluding sentiments. This series we started from scratch and is organized completely internally at the BSL. And the success, I believe, can be zeroed down to two areas. Firstly, we have been able to reach out successfully to our entire membership on a regular basis, which we did not do before. Also, we have now through this series been able to provide our membership with a non-stop source of continuing education, which is something very close to my heart. Even though there was an additional workload due to these webinars, it has been personally very satisfying, as it is for a good cause, the benefits of which we will see in our profession in the years to come. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Josh.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Mr. Salia Piris, President's Council, the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, to share his thoughts on this remarkable milestone. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Josh. Good evening. On behalf of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, let me congratulate the Seminars Committee on this 100th BASL webinar, which takes place today. This is part of a series of four series of webinars, and I must congratulate Rajiv. And I know the effort which he puts in and his team puts in to these organizing these webinars. So today we have a very distinguished panel who will speak on the multifaceted legal sphere reaching the pinnacle. And I must say that I'm privileged to be here. I have associated with many members of the panel, and some members of the panel I have from the very beginning of my career, I have associated with them, and I'm grateful to them for all the support which they have given me personally during my career. And so I'm very happy that they are here, and I'm sure the membership will benefit from their insight into the legal profession. So thank you, Rajiv, and thank you to the members of the panel, and congratulations. And for the series of these four series, now we have webinars in all three languages, in English, in Sinhala, and in Tamil, as well as the webinar series which I held on Sundays relating to the to professional upliftment. So thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to warmly welcome our distinguished panel for this evening, comprising the Honorable Justice Shirani Tilakavardhana, Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama, Mr. Palita Fernando, President's Council, Professor Naganathan Silva Kumaran, and for the evening, Mr. Shayhan Gunavardhana. While these legal luminaries need no further introduction because their reputations precede them, I would be failing in my duty if I don't provide at least a brief introduction to all of them, whilst warmly welcoming them today. First and foremost, I welcome Justice Shirani Tilakavardhana. Justice Tilakavardhana appointed as the first female state counsel in Sri Lanka in 1978. She is also the first female court judge, the first woman justice of the Court of Appeal, and the first woman president of the Court of Appeal. She ascended to the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka and has also served as acting Chief Justice. After her retirement from the judiciary, she became a consultant to the Sri Lanka Judges Institute, where she has continued to date. Justice Shirani Tilakavardhana provides her expertise as a judicial educator in many parts of the world. She has also served as an arbitrator for several national and international. She is also the first Air Force Marshal prosecutor in Sri Lanka. She also serves several organizations such as UNDP, UNODC, ILO, ICJ, and FPA, and continues to work as a consultant, expert advisor, and panelist with organizations such as Law Legal Action Worldwide, Max Planck Institute, and is presently on the advisory board of the ASEAN Judicial Integrity Network. She is also the deputy chair of the Judicial Integrity Group, where she presently works on the amendments to the Bangalore Principles of Judicial Conduct. She is also the deputy chair of the Judicial Integrity Group. She has recently been invited to be a member of the drafting panel for the Bangkok General Guidance for Judges on applying a gender perspective in South Asia by the ICJ. Her areas of focus are equality, gender and child rights, environmental law, and judicial integrity. She holds 2 honorary doctorates in law from Smith College and Williams College in the USA. She also has a diploma in forensic medicine from the University of Sri Lanka. Madam, we are privileged to have you today. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama. Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama practiced law before serving briefly as the Attorney General of Sri Lanka and then as the Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Justice from the years 1970 to 1977. He was also a member of the Judicial Service Advisory Board. Dr. Jayavikrama was also an Associate Professor of Law at the University of Hong Kong, Ariel F. Swallows Professor of Human Rights, University of Saskatchewan, Canada, and Executive Director of Transparency International, Berlin. Since 2000, he works as a UN consultant on judicial reform. He has also worked with several governments and judiciaries and is the rapporteur of the UN-sponsored Judicial Integrity Group. He is the author of the Judicial Application of Human Rights Law, Cambridge University Press. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Also joining us today is Mr. Palita Fernando, President's Counsel. Mr. Palita Fernando, after taking oaths in 1979, joined the Attorney General's Department in 1980 as an acting state counsel. He has served as a senior state counsel, deputy solicitor general, and additional solicitor general. He was conferred Silk as a President's Counsel in 2007. In 2011, he was appointed as the Solicitor General. He has also served as the head of the Criminal Division of the Attorney General's Department. Mr. Palita Fernando was appointed as the Attorney General in 2012. He has handled many important cases as a member of the Attorney General's Department, and he has conducted the prosecution at several presidential commissions of inquiry. He has also served in the volunteer force of the Sri Lanka Navy and was promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral in 2007. He has served as the head of the legal division of the Sri Lanka Navy and as a judge advocate of the Sri Lanka Navy till the year 2004. Thank you so much for joining with us today, sir. Next, I would like to welcome Professor Naganathan Silva Kumaran. Professor Silva Kumaran is presently serving as the head of the School of Law at Sri Lanka Institute of Information Technology. Before that, he has served the University of Colombo for well over 43 years as an academic in the Faculty of Law until his retirement in September 2018. In the university, he had held the post of head of the Department of Law many a time and as the Dean of the Faculty of Law for a continuous period of 12 years from 2000 to 2012. He had been a member of the Senate and the Council of the University of Colombo for a number of years and has also acted for the Vice Chancellor on a number of occasions. Professor Silva Kumaran's primary area of expertise is in public law, mainly constitutional and administrative law. He has also gained expertise in the fields of intellectual property law and information technology law. His research papers and articles have been published in reputed journals. He had participated in many conferences and seminars, both national and international. During his career, he had the honor of being invited to serve on the executive management boards of a number of reputed institutes of state. He had served as a member of the Constitutional Council and the Law Commission of Sri Lanka, member and chairman of the Official Language Commission of Sri Lanka, member of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, and as a member of the Sri Lanka Foundation. Professor Silva Kumaran has also served on the Council of the Open University of Sri Lanka and the Board of Management of many academic institutions, such as the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, Postgraduate Institute of Agriculture, Postgraduate Institute of Indigenous Medicine, Institute of Human Resource Advancement, etc. He was also a member of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the local government in Sri Lanka in the 1990s. He continues to be a senior legal advisor to the University of Colombo today. Thank you for joining with us today, sir. Next is our moderator, Mr. Shayhan Gunavardhana. Mr. Shayhan Gunavardhana is an attorney at law of the Supreme Court of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. He was called to the bar in December 2002 and worked in the chambers of Mr. Harsha Amarasekara, President's Counsel. For the last 18 plus years, he specialized in the following areas of practice of law, namely the drafting and vetting of corporate agreements between local as well as international parties, all types of civil litigation, including money recovery, land law, company law, banking, intellectual property law, delictual claims, leasing and finance, and labor law, to name a few. He also provides advice on incorporation, corporate restructuring, and winding up. Mr. Gunavardhana presently serves as a delegate to the Bar Council and consultant on commercial law reforms at the Ministry of Justice. Sir, we are thankful to have you with us today. Over to you, Mr. Gunavardhana.
Thank you very much, Josh, for a very elaborate introduction of our panelists and also doing me the honor of introducing me. I must say that I am extremely honored to have been bestowed this opportunity of moderating the 100th webinar of the Bar Association. And it is also my honor, the honor that is bestowed on me is twofold, because I am honored to be the moderator where a panel of such legal luminaries are to be interviewed, so to speak, by me. And I'm very thankful. And we will get into the business of the evening of the webinar. This webinar, as has been the previous ones also, in this particular segment or in this particular series of webinars, is to share the knowledge, the experience, and also the advice of very senior practitioners in the law. And therefore, it has been very aptly named the multifaceted legal sphere, for the reason that the study of the law opens up different areas of practice in the law. And our luminaries today on our panel represent those different areas of the practice of the law, one from the judiciary, one from two from academics, and one from the practice of in the official bar and as well as the private bar. They have all reached their pinnacles, and it's an extreme honor bestowed on me to be able to pose the questions and take this webinar forward. Firstly, the question that I would like to invite the panelists to speak to us on, of course, we'll keep it as informal as possible, madam, gentlemen, and I would like to hear your thoughts on how you took the decision to study law and to enter the profession of the law, because we have heard Josh speak elaborately on all your achievements or most of your achievements, but we would like to know what motivated you to taking to the study of the law. And may I first invite Madam Shirani Tilakavardhana, Justice retired of the Supreme Court, to speak to us on this. Yes, madam.
Good evening, Mr. Gunavardhana. It's a privilege and pleasure for me to be with you, especially with the many young lawyers who I hope are listening to this. And I think when I was first approached about this, one of the first things I said, I'm a very private person and I don't like to share things about my life because it is private to me. But I had already, when Mr. Rajiv called me, I thought he was going to ask me to give a lecture on something, and I was thinking, okay, which am I going to talk about? The dangers of child abuse and what's going on with the gaming, with this whole Zoom technology that is coming in. And I'm thinking about it. And Sunday I heard him saying, it's about talking of your life experience. And I had virtually consented by then. So I said, yes, but I am going to talk about, simply because I think one can also learn from the experience of others. And it takes more than study and academia, the academic approach to the legal studies. It takes so much more to understand the multifaceted things about the law. So I would like to start, so when I will be pulling out these qualities, and if I can, take it up right at the beginning, give you an example about why I'm saying this is important. So as a person, I was very versatile. I was resourceful. I had multi-talents because of the life I led. And it was not just a theoretical approach I had, but I had actually experienced clinical learning, as you call it, and developed a lot of life skills by the time I was quite young. And this happened because, one, I went to Bishop's College. And at Bishop's College, there were so few girls in the school at the time that you had to take part in everything, from Shakespearean plays to dances to, and you took part in every religious function. You took part in reading at the literary societies. You took part in sports. So you were in your house and you'll be told, okay, you have to do long jump, high jump, hurdles, and 4 into, because there wasn't enough children to go around who were really talented who come. So there was a lot of versatility there. And I also was born into a family which is a middle class family. My father was a doctor who later became a consultant surgeon. My mom was a happy person at home and, very, very best friend to all of us. And at a very young age, this family that I was born to, which was bound, it began with a love marriage, and it was this laughter and, fun, tempered with robust discipline, I must say, that my father went abroad and he never thought of leaving the family behind. We all were on a ship going to England in one of those, at the time, Dutch shipping companies, of just cruisers, and took 14 days on the sea to arrive in England. And when I went to England, I had the privilege of schooling in Scotland, in England, Scotland, London, in Kent. So there was this whole different experiences I went with. We didn't have helpers. We had to do everything on our own. And then he was such an adventurous person, and he was the person with all his work. We'd go and we traveled we traveled Europe. We didn't go in Pajeros or, these luxury vehicles. We went by train, and we went to places like, and I remember even on the ship, we stopped at Naples and Cairo, and then we went to Europe and we saw all these wonderful things. And I remember going to Paris, and by then I was steeped. I was a great, voracious leader and had reader and had read almost everything about the artists like Monet and Klee and the abstract artists and Kandinsky who started this. And I remember of all those places, you know, 2 places struck me. One was Paris, and I saw the artists actually painting on the side of the river scene, and I could see the you know, I remember the great literature that was behind it about their bohemian life where they painted and they lived in studio apartments and had wine and bread and such a jolly time. And I thought it was such a romantic, wonderful thing, and it made an impression. Anyway, all this aside, we came back. And of course, our adventures continued. Our life was, there were 3 vacations a year. As soon as the school closed down, we went into, April was Norelia, the other 2 were jungles. Sometimes it was by car, we would go around the map of Ceylon to the red dots, which are the rest houses and things. Some rest houses, like the Muttur rest house, there was really nothing, though we crossed the ferry system. And it was a lot of adventure, but we had so much to do. We went hunting, and at that time, hunting was not banned. We went angling, fishing, lobster spearing, crabs, you know, bashing them with the polpitas and then having it on the beach. We caught shunt torches and had prawns jumping. That was how live the environment was and how much we enjoyed ourselves. And one thing I had to do to join the boys who went into this was I had to learn to cook on 3 stones. And that was a real art, and I acquired that art. And I can remember coming from the jungles, you know, almost picking out the ticks from your body and then coming, feeling ravenously hungry. And in Paranthal, we'd walk into this little, because we had little stopovers, not luxurious hotels. We had 3 places we stayed in. One was in this house that belonged to my father's friend, which had a swimming pool. And that was where my mom and, you know, those who didn't want to go on jungle trips stayed. I wanted to go, not just go, I wanted to be the lead. And it was all the boys, young boys our age, these boys from the area. And we'd go and you know, we'd chase talagoyas with the dogs. And it was just this amazing. So I learned to do this, you know, all these things. And so we traveled and we'd go to Coral Cottage in Vakarai, Trincomalee, Ranganathan's cottage, and those who knows these places know it offers treasures of the environment. And then we would sleep under a large siamala tree, you know, talking about what we were going to become. And I remember coming back and we'd have pittu with hot pittu with mangoes. And why I'm telling you these details is later on, when I was sitting on the bench and somebody spoke about a little kuppi lampur, you know, the little lamp, which gave light to this little thatched little room. I knew that you could identify people with that. I knew the food they ate. I knew how they slept in, what kind of beds. I knew what it was. So it was giving me a great insight into all of this. And then I think somewhere about 16 or 17, my father called me and he said, you know, and it preceded a bad incident in my life. And I think I'll share that too with you. You know, I was never I hated to sit and by heart and study. I always wanted to study smart and not study, you know, hard. It was my thing. How can I do the least bit of work and achieve the most? And I was studying these big physics books and inside a biology book, I think. And inside it was a love story. And at about 11 o'clock, you know, in the night, and I was engrossed in this love story. And suddenly my staff, there was a very strict discipline, was standing there. And my book fell out of shock. And this love story went right under his wing. And I thought I am in for it and waited for the barrage. But no, he just looked at me. He walked out. Went to school the next day and I came back and there was this big board in my room. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it shall follow as the night the day. Thou then canst be false to no man. And that really struck. I think that was my first lesson of what integrity was all about. I wished he had thrashed me or scolded me or done something, but he didn't. And he, sometime later, you know, so it passed off. And then he one day tapped me on my seat, when I was sitting with him in the front seat, and remember one thing. life is about wisdom is power. And I heard knowledge is power. And only later I learned that you have knowledge that is translated through understanding into wisdom. And that is what we must aid. It is that wisdom that gives you power. So anyway, so he called me when I was, I think, finished my A-level, and he sat me down one day and he said, okay, serious conversation. And because the message comes from mom to go and sit with him. And I sat down and said, well, what do you want to become? And I said, looked very serious with all the earnestness, this whole thing inside me said, Dad, I really want to be an artist in Paris. I want to go back to France. I want to lead that life. I want to paint. And I remember very clearly the shock in my father's face. And then he said, Connie, which is my mom's name, come here. And he said, I'm asking her what she wants to do for her career. And she's telling me her hobby. And I said, no. Then I realized now you could sense the vibes were very bad, and I sensed it. And then I said, well, I'd like to, colors, paint. Quickly it came to my head, interior decorator. And he said, all right. And that was him. After my A-levels, he came one day and he said, tomorrow morning, get ready at such and such. I got into the car and went to, I didn't even know where I was driving to, law college. He walked into law college. He was always very dressed in white and very smart. And even nobody even thought of bullying me, I think, because he was there. And he walked in and he said, I'm so-and-so, and can I have these forms? And he came and he said, fill them. And I filled them. I signed it. And that's how I ended in my career in law. It was a combination of parental discipline and some destiny, which at that time I knew absolutely nothing about. That's my own trait. Yes.
Very inspirational figure, I must say.
Yes.
Thank you, madam. That's very, very, very nice of you to share those memories with us. Thank you very much. Might I now move on to Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama. Dr. Jayavikrama, posing the same question to you. We heard the pinnacle that you have reached in your career, and it is absolutely inspiring. But tell us how you came to take an interest in the law. You unmute. Yes, thank you.
Sorry. I think I was probably about 9 years of age when I decided that I had to be a lawyer. Now, I had no other options because that was a family business. My father was a lawyer, his brothers were lawyers, his cousins were lawyers, my mother's brothers were lawyers, so that we didn't think that we were competent to do anything else. So that was the choice. Well, I didn't think of any other profession. My brother wanted to be a doctor, and there was consternation in the family. He was told, well, you can't be because you can only be a lawyer. But he did it his way and turned out to be a fairly good physician. But I didn't want to do anything else. I'd assumed from a very young age that I would be a lawyer.
Was there anything else, if I may put a follow-on question, sir, was there anything else that would have interested you, presuming, okay, that my first option is the law. Was there a second option, just out of interest?
No, as I said, I was about 9 years old when I took that decision. When I was younger than that, about maybe about 6 or 7, and I was in primary school at Richmond College in Gaul. And that was a one-session school. So when I came back home to the fort where we lived, my father used to come for lunch from his office, and I used to go back with him to his office because his clerk was a very kind gentleman who allowed me to use his typewriter. So I spent quite some time at that age also in a lawyer's office. No, there are no other options. No, I didn't consider anything else.
Well, it's very, very nice to think that you had your path so very straight from the age of 9. I'm extremely.
But it wasn't easy because to do law one had to enter either law college or go to the university. I was not interested in the law college, so I applied to. I was at Royal College, I wanted to do my university entrance. I tried the first time and I came down and I failed. Didn't get the 4 subjects. The second time also I sat and I didn't have my Latin to enter the law faculty and failed in one other subject. So a number of my friends told me, well, why don't you try the law college? Because you got your O-levels and you can enter there. I said, no, there's only one place I want to go to, and that's law faculty. So I tried the third time, and that time I got in. And I suppose it was, I was destined to get in the third time because I got in with the young lady who later became my wife. If I had got in the first time or the second time, I probably would not have met her.
Destiny has its way.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Jayavikrama. Might I now pose the same question to Mr. Palita Fernando, President's Counsel? Sir, we know the pinnacles you have reached in your career, and apart from being an excellent and an eminent lawyer, you have also been one of the most loved, if not the most loved lecturer at Law College as well. So please tell us, share with us what inspired you to enter the profession of the law.
Thank you, Shayhan. I don't know whether my answer would disappoint you, but then I didn't even in the wildest of my dreams think of becoming a lawyer. I wanted to be a doctor. So what I did was I did studies in that field, and then I could not enter the medical faculty. I was rather disappointed. When I was disappointed, then I did not know what to do. Now, Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama said the correct thing. He had several members in his family who were lawyers. So in my case also, my teachers at Royal College, they told me that you should join law college because they are sure you will do very well. By that time, I had done very well in debating at Royal. I was the only person who had become a member of both the Single and English debating teams. And they thought that I should join law college and become a lawyer. But then my relatives, Dr. Jayavikrama, this will interest you, my relatives told my parents with very good intentions, they discouraged them and told them, no, I don't think you should enter law college because to succeed in a career in law, you should have a legal background, you should have lawyers in your family. And then my poor mother and father thinking of at least getting me to become a bank clerk. And then I can still remember my father brought a typewriter home and then taught me typing. And Shayhan will be surprised to note that I can type very well. I don't need to look at the keyboard when I type today. And my secretaries in the Attorney General's department will tell you that I never dictated in letters to them. I typed them myself. That is because of my background. So then ultimately what happened was, well, it was destiny. I entered law college because Mr. Nilandu, he's an attorney at law, he told me that I should come with him to law college because he wanted to join law college, and that is how I came to law college. And once I came to law college, I was very happy there, and I did quite well at law college. And I must tell you, I must repeat what Mr. Nihal Jayavikrama, Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama said. I also with my future wife at law college. And so that being my destiny. So thereafter, after I joined law college, I took a liking to it. I thought that it was a wonderful place. My memories at the Sri Lanka Law College are wonderful. And also I was able to win the Hector Jayawardena gold medal. And also I won the medal for Sinhala, address to the jury in Sinhala. I became the president of the Law Students Union. So I achieved all those because I joined law college, and I'm happy that I joined law college today. Maybe fate decreed that I should not be a doctor, but the Attorney General of Sri Lanka. That is my story, Shayhan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Very, very inspiring. And the loss to the medical profession, if I may say so, was to the absolute benefit of the legal profession. And we should thank your destiny for not having steered you in that direction, if I do have the liberty of saying that. Thank you. Might I now pose the same question to Professor Silva Kumaran? Sir, again, we know the great heights that you have reached and the many areas and the many posts in which you have served the state and also the university and now APIT. May I ask you how you took an interest in the law?
Thank you, Shayhan. First of all, I would like to thank the Bar Association for inviting me to this wonderful webinar. The factors or the motivational fact was my father and one of my uncles. My father, noticing certain qualities in me, wanted me to study the subjects in A-level which will permit me to enter either law college or the law faculty. And I did well in my A-level and I was selected first time to enter the law faculty. And two of my elder brothers who happen to be lawyers, they are also law graduates and lawyers, they were also inspirational for me to take up to law. But initially my parents and my uncle wanted me to be practicing lawyer. But once I joined the law faculty, the reputation and respect in which my teachers were held inspired me to become an academic. Midway studying, I changed my idea to take up to practice rather than I would like to continue to be an academic if that is possible. So I worked hard in my studies and I became a teacher in the law faculty. It is because of Professor Nadaraja, Professor Savitri Gunasekara, Professor G.L. Pliris, Dr. Nirmala Chandrahasan, and so many others, Professor Anton Puri. These were my, but I didn't have any single teacher as my role model. I picked up different traits from my teachers, and I felt that yes, I will follow them and I will be a teacher in the law faculty. That made me to enter the academia. But my initial this thing is my parents and my uncle.
I suppose parents do play a huge role, even still, in guiding their children towards profession, which ultimately they do triumph in, and possibly from the four views or from the four experiences that you have presented, eminent panelists, I would think we can easily conclude that parental guidance has played a very, very important role in ultimately achieving the pinnacles that you have achieved. Don't you think so?
Also, destiny, Shayhan, I think destiny also plays a role. Before you proceed any further, there is one thing that I think I should mention. There was a classmate of mine who was selected to the medical faculty, and then he said, "No, I don't want to join the medical faculty. I want to join the law faculty." I'm sure Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya must be aware of that person. That was none other than Justice Prasanna Jayawardena. And he joined the law faculty, refusing to join the medical faculty.
Thank you, Mr. Fernando. That's true. I do agree with you on that. Going on to our next round, if I may, I would like to pose this question to Justice Nihal Jayavikrama. Madam, during your career progression, is there any personal lessons that you learned while you climbed the ladder, so to speak, in the career in the legal sphere? And also, whilst answering my question, particularly from you, I would like to also get your views on this notion of the glass ceiling. where there is comment and there is a view in across the world that for females it is doubly hard to achieve or to achieve the pinnacle of their careers. Would you also subscribe to this view, and what have been your experiences? Justice Gunavardhana, are you with us?
Has happened. So can I unmute and put my camera on again?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, Madam, did you hear my question?
I heard absolutely. I could hear you very clearly, but I
Right.
got muted, so I thought it was because the thing is playing up. Sometimes you mute the speakers and things because
Yes.
it's a better. The hearing is better then. So now this question I'm going to ask, and I always told you, you know, I'm doing this for the young people. I want them to never be discouraged, never to know how do you negotiate the different parts of life. And one of the things I'll start with, never be afraid of obstructions or hardships, because our characters are built in the midstream of our life. You know, if you're a person who never had a problem, and I know many parents do this with their children, they give them everything they never had, and they pamper them and they give, you know, I mean, before you know it, you had smartphones and hundreds of cars and, you know, all kinds of things. But children, to find the three most important things in their life is independence, integrity, and intimacy. And they will never find it if you just give them everything in their life, because they will sail along with the excesses. They will get used to a different sort of life. And when a real problem comes by, one puff, and they will be on the floor. So yes, my life was fraught with many obstacles, but I think I was born with this optimism and idealism, and I always have it. I remember Dayaparada telling me, you're an absolute anachronism. You have these high ideals and you're just not for this. Mind you, this was years and years ago. But you know, I think that being that idealist, being that person who would not compromise, because I had this whole thing that the law and it was, and I think again, another lesson my father taught, he always said, serve the poor. As a doctor, he never made much money as a private practitioner. He gave the best to the poor. So if the person was really sick, you got the bed number one. And he maintained strict discipline in office. And so I think that, you know, it washes into the family that, you know, look for the vulnerable. To me, it was a broader sphere because I started, and it comes from my quest for equality. So let me start at the beginning and tell you my initial problem was actually I couldn't even put my first step on the ladder. Of course, I had a wonderful time. I worked with Untitled Chapter. My experience of my first case was he gave me a thin brief and he said, keep the case down. Me sat in the labor trial, into the labor tribunal case, and I turned the pages, and you know, all of you will know that first case that you get, you know. So I went through it and I found, my gosh, there's a really good point on this, and I think it was prescription. You know, it was just such a simple case, and I quickly wrote what I had to say. And now I'm practicing. I'm going to say this. You know, you're saying everything. And I think it was a president called, the labor tribunal president, this guy called Naganathan, if I'm not mistaken, who was the toughest labor tribunal president you could get. And he said, get a date. So I stood up there and said, he said, Mr. Atulat Mudal is not going to get any more dates from me. I am not giving him any more dates. I am taking this case up at the end of the day, and either he comes or you get ready. You know, we didn't have cell phones and things as today. So it was, you know, somebody was sent to run and give a court, and you know, nobody was in other courts. He was probably in 5 other courts. So comes the afternoon, and he said, and I stood up, and you know, that feeling you get, you know it, you're confident, and you get on your feet, and you know the opening sentence, and it won't come out, you know, it's stuck in your throat, and I had to sort of clear my throat and then gush out the words, and I wasn't at all eloquent or right, or, you know, and forgot all my proper speaking in English, and it came out. And he listened to me. I think he felt sorry for me because he knew I had been put in this place. And he said, yes, prescription, and he gave the order. And I was riding away, and I turned on and he said, Mr. Atulatmudal, who happened to walk in right at that moment. And he said, your junior has won the case. Something about Lalit Atulatmudal's face was not right. My boss, and he was boss to me. And as I was walking, he said, who asked you to argue this case? I told you to keep, you're not going to finish it off on the first date. And now that was the approach of a lawyer who did not want a case which could go on for 2 or 3 days to be finished on the first date. So I had this dichotomy of evaluation, one telling me you should never have finished the case. You should have somehow, waited for that. And I came just a few minutes later. So that was the first thing. But so I had a very good experience as a lawyer, and then some man was there. And I tell you, one thing I hated was the fees that had to be paid, because a young man who was there came running to me after that. I was hanging around waiting for my vehicle to come. And he said, madam, can you take my, I'm standing on the steps of the LT taking totally against my view of how a consultant to be. And he said, what is your fee? And I explained what 2 guineas were, very modest fee even for those times. And anyway, so he left, and then he left something, and I said, okay, the next date is this, you come, I will meet you right here. See, again, that was a simple matter. And again, and I had this, never underestimate these barefoot lawyers in the LT. Very smart, they go through so many cases. And I remember thinking, oh, he's not even a lawyer, but he was very good. But somehow, again, luck, the facts of the case that I had studied it. Quickly it was disposed, and I came out. Now I'm going to earn my first really independent fee. And he stood on the steps there, and he said something. I'm waiting for him to give me my fees. Very shy also to take money from a person. And he gave this to me in an envelope, and he just vanished. So now I'm, slowly putting it into my file and looking at it, and then sort of look. It was 20 rupees, because I think he couldn't afford it, but he didn't. And I looked up and he had gone. And I felt, I don't know, you feel these are poor people and why am I taking even fees? I felt so bad. And I think it always, to me, accepting money for services was a profession which I didn't really want to be associated with. And it put me off. And I think the second thing that happened to me was I went into a courthouse and I saw Kenneth Seniviratna. I don't know whether you even know him. He was DPP at the time, and he was prosecuting in a case. And that was the Chatham House murder case. And we as young law students, we had a gang of girls, and we'd go and sit in those courthouses. And I just, thought that is the job I want to do. And that is when I decided to join the Aegis department. And the application came in. Now we're talking of 76 or so. So it was C.R. De Silva, a whole heap of my batchmates, they were we had the proctors and advocates at that time. I think Arsakula Raskin was with me in the advocates, and we applied. And I went for the interview. I thought I had done extremely well at the interview. Ian Vikram Naika called me, Mrs. Kumar Singh called me after that. And they both told me I had got into the Aegis department. Now, still, I would have been the first woman as a counsel. I was over the moon. It was, how you feel when you get your first job, then dream has come true. And I came out, Mr. Gunavardhana. And 2 days later, or 1 day later, somebody called and said, the minister has cut your name off. And the minister was Mr. Felix Das Bandaranaike. And I was devastated. And why? Because you come from a UNP chambers. Then this has been the bane of my life. If you are, in the UNP, you're called SLF. If you hold against, and for instance, I have held against Jayavardhan in a matter, then I'm SLF. If I hold against an SLFP person, I'm UNP. This whole thing, which is nebulous state, which I seem to be spending my life in. And I was for neither. And then I was devastated. It was humiliation. I can't tell you how awful it felt. For the first time in my life, I was humiliated. And the postscript to this story is, today, it's such a strange thing that Dr. Jayavikrama and I should be on the panel. Because almost a year or a little longer earlier, I always blame him. And of course, subsequently, I went abroad and told my dad I want to go abroad, went to America, worked in the DA's office, came back and came for the second interview. And that was after the elections. That was in 78. And of course, I was taken in. And I'll tell you, and the problem that emanated after I got him, which is also rocky as anything, you know. And Dr. Jayavardhana told me, sorry, Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama told me, he said, it was not Felix Dias who took you in. The Attorney General was Justice Vanasundara, and Justice Vanasundara was a bachelor. And he genuinely believed that no woman could do this job. And because of that, I lost 2 years of my career. And my dreams shattered, and, you know, so again, that is why, you know, when life gives you lemons, you have to learn to make lemonade, drink it, and survive for the next battle. Of course, later when I came back again, I joined with 8 boys and went into this police room, which had 9 state council in the room with 1 bathroom. I won't tell you, the women will understand how difficult it was. The boys got the 15 files to the Court of Appeal, and I got nothing. And I thought, I'm a girl, I'm going to be treated well here, it looks like. And then the DPP, Kenneth Sethiratna, said to me, and he said, in your interview, we asked you whether you could go to Polonnaruwa, where the train goes at this, you know, late. You have to go by train, you have to get up. And you said, well, I have been to the States, and if I can go to the States and come back, why can't I go to Polonnaruwa? And he threw a file at me, and he did a circle, and it came into and it was MC Polonnaruwa. I took it. I mean, adventurous as I was like, I'm going to do this. I mean, and then we were put under 2, Anil Silva and myself, we were put into pairs, and we were put under supervising officers. And the blessedness of my life at that time was enter through the door of Mr. D.S. Vijay Singh. Bless his soul. He's passed away recently. And the greatest tribute to me, my life, everything I owe 2 great people in my life. One is D.S. Vijay, he was my friend, my mentor, my critic, everything. And the second was Mr. Ukwansiyapa, who would, I mean, he really harassed me, you know, he really took me bait. He refined me. You know how gold is refined in the fires? I went through those fires. But when he sent it to me, and he said something else, which I didn't have the language to reply to at that time. Today, I would have given a thesis as a reply. He said, 2 people on the board did not want a woman into this place. I do not think any woman can succeed in this job. And I was one of the people who didn't want you. I will send you home in 6 months. Now, that is where I used to have fires, 1 day in Jaffna, 1 day in Anuradhapura, 3rd day in Gampula. But I loved it. I was a traveler. I was, you know, put my kit bag and, you know, my scarf around and go by train. And so my life skills I learned as a young person became a strength for me. I learned never to be bitter, because I learned early in life I went to this thing called the Congress Washington, D.C. breakfast meeting, where a senator got up and said how his mother told him, never carry bitterness inside, which is a heavy burden. And we have this thing in the Bible which says, love your enemies. I find that very difficult to do. It's a path I'm still working on. But I could pray for the Lord to seek out the wickednesses in our enemies. And the tragedy was, before those 6 months were over, Kenneth Senviratna, whom I admired terribly, he was my role model at that time. He died, he had cancer, and he was operated, and he never came back to the department after that. So it's a sad story, because I really feel he taught me, and D.S. Vijay Singh was, you can trust him with any secret. I wish the young people could have D.S. Vijay Singhers in their life, a confidant, a friend. So there's always that oasis in your life. Look for those people and then build up from that. People you can trust and you can, you know, who teach you, who just simply find fault with you, constructively criticize you, and never be arrogant. Because if you don't take that criticism, you will never succeed. So learn to be humble through your life. And the higher you go, the more humble you should become within yourself. And that's the lesson I learned. So I think there's so much of interesting stories between all of us that I will bow out right now.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. It's very enlightening and also very inspiring. So as much as the glass ceiling is there, you should never make it an obstacle.
Get a steel lift. It helps.
Naturally.
And that does not mean seek patronage. Never seek patronage from anybody, but from within yourself, work hard and work as hard as you possibly can. That's the panacea and the answer for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. If I may directly go towards Mr. Palita Fernando on this very point, sir. In your progression in your career, what are the personal attributes that you would think that you would like to share? The lessons that you learned personally when you were rising in your career, maybe particularly in the early stages of your career, sir. Mr. Fernando.
Yes, there again, Shayhan, I must tell you that I'm delighted that Mr. Nihal Jayavikrama is here. Because Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama, I was an apprentice. When I was an apprentice, there was a special presidential commission that was appointed and which had an inquiry, and Mr. Nihal Jayavikrama. And then, as an apprentice, the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation wanted me as a law student to cover the proceedings. And I'm sure Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama remembers that because I reminded him of this particular instance. And then Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama was defended by Queen's Counsel, Mr. S. Naganathan. It was a treat to watch him, the way he conducted the case, the defense. And also, I met giants the bar for the first time at Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama's inquiry. Mr. Banti de Souza, Mr. A.C. de Souza, Mr. Sunil de Silva, who later became Attorney General, and many other seniors came there. And that inquiry, we followed that inquiry with a lot of interest. You would not believe, Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama will agree with me. When Mr. Queen's Counsel Naganathan cross-examined the witnesses, he had all the questions written. Now, before he starts his cross-examination, he writes all the questions and also the answers that he expects. And then he conducted that case, and we were watching Mr. Silva and Mr. A.C. were prosecuting. And at the end of it, Mr. Queen's Counsel Naganathan made his submission, the final submission. After the final submission, he didn't come for 3 days. Dr. Jayavikrama, you remember that. And Dr. Jayavikrama was left to defend himself. 3 days he did not come. Then when he came back, we all went to him. And then we said, sir, why were you not here? We missed you. Then he said, you know, I did a lot of hard work. I hardly slept during that time. And these 3 days, I told Nihal, and I slept and rested. When he looked at me, I can still visualize that. He knew that I was a law student. He said, young man, remember this. There is no substitute to hard work if you want to succeed in the legal profession. Those words I remember up to date. So Dr. Jayavikrama's inquiry, I met Dr. Jayavikrama. He was also a giant, a smart young man, not that he was less smart today at that time. So he used to talk to us, and we used to enjoy talking to him also. He had been Secretary, Ministry of Justice at that time. And then thereafter, I happened to join the Attorney General's Department. My joining the Attorney General's Department was also something, I think destiny had some role to play in it also. Because I happened to go to the High Court of Negombo to appear in an assignment. The State Council there was a old royalist, deemed it, and he told me that I should come to Negombo and do an assignment. And that assignment was in respect of a person who had killed another because he was provoked. And then I made my submission in litigation before Mr. Siva Sellaya, the late Justice Siva Sellaya. And then I still remember after my submission, Mr. Siva Sellaya, I think was happy with the submission that I made, but then I gave him a bit of an answer which I thought I annoyed him, because he said, Mr. Fernando, I agree with you that he would have been provoked, but then is it a provocation to kill a person? And my reply to him was, Your Honor, you would have ignored it with a smile, but this poor man who was an uneducated villager could not control himself. Mr. Ernie Pereira, who was seated in court, told me that I thought he would regard you for that answer. Far from it. He had spoken to Mr. Siva Pasupati and told Mr. Siva Pasupati there was a young lawyer who came and appeared before me. I think he is fit to be recruited to the Attorney General's Department. Now that was one thing that made me join the Attorney General's Department. The Attorney General's Department, my seniors were very kind to me. Mr. Sunil Disila, Mr. Kumaran, Mr. Siva Pasupati. And why not Justice Shayhan Gunavardhana? She was also a senior officer of the department. You could go to her at any time. She was a bit hard, she was tough, but then she always was ready to help a junior, and there are many instances she helped me. So in the department, those people in the department guided us. By that time, Mr. Kenneth Selviratna was no more, and Mr. D.S. Vijay Singh was not in the department anymore, but then people like Mr. Silva and Mr. Kumar, they helped us a lot. You could always go to them and explain to them if you have made a mistake. I can remember, Shayhan, this I must mention. My son was sick, and then I came to the department that day because there was a case in which I had to appeal. I went to the chambers of Mr. Kumaran, and when he saw me, he asked me, "Why did you come?" Because he knew that my son was hospitalized. Then I told him, "Sir, I have a case to do that. Hang the case and get back immediately." He said, those are the very words I never forget. So they helped us. They were always there to stand by us. And those giants in the department guided us. And that is how we came here. So Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama's inquiry, I thought I should mention, because many people I met there, they were a real inspiration. Mr. Naganathan, and also Dr. Jayavikrama, will remember the cross-examination of Mr. Nihal Jayavikrama by Mr. Naganathan. That was a wonderful piece of cross-examination, which I would never forget. I have tried to emulate Mr. Naganathan, but you just can't. You have to have a lot of stamina to do hard work like Mr. Naganathan. But then those words I remember, young man, there is no substitute to hard work in this profession. So that is what I have to share.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. If I may pose the same question to Professor Silva Kumaran, sir, in your eyes, in your career in academia, you said that you looked at different people and took what you wanted, the attributes from them, to build your unique career, not just a career path really, but your unique characteristics, if I may use the word. But can you please enlighten us on what your take is on this particular question that I have posed with regard to what are the personal lessons that you learned in your career progression?
Yes, I will start with an anecdote which I encountered during my initial years as a junior teacher. It was in 1981, Justice Dr. H.W. Tambaya, who taught me in the law faculty as a visiting lecturer, he invited me to write a piece for the law bulletin, because he was the vice chairman of the Law Commission of Sri Lanka there. Justice Victor Tennakun was the chairman and he was the vice chairman. So he invited me to write an article for the bulletin of the Law Commission. This to mark the 50th anniversary of universal franchise that Sri Lanka enjoyed. It was in 81. So the 1978 Constitution was enacted and I was teaching constitutional law. And then I found 1978 Constitution has for the first time introduced the referendum. So then I thought I will write a piece on the legislative supremacy or sovereignty of the people and the referendum. So when I wrote that article, it was Dr. Tambaya wanted me to write it in Tamil because the bulletin is to have articles in all three languages. So I wrote it in Tamil. And when analyzing Article 85, I wrote that the president shall refer a bill when it is passed by 2/3 majority in parliament, which has been either declared by the Supreme Court to get 2/3 and people's approval, or if the cabinet has certified that it will be presented before the people after getting 2/3, the president shall present it to the people. Then the following article, sub-article 2, said president may refer a bill which is not for the amendment of the constitution, but which is a simple bill. And when it is rejected by parliament, he can refer it to the people, and if the people approve, he can make it into law. So this is, I'm dealing with the people's sovereignty as opposed to parliament capacity or supremacy to make laws. So while I analyzed this, I said, if the president, after parliament passed a bill with 2/3 majority, he doesn't refer it to the people. He delays the reference, or he doesn't refer it at all. Then by Article 35, no one can bring any action against the president because he can't be a party to any proceedings while he or she holds office. Then I suggested, in such a scenario, parliament should invoke Article 37 and impeach him for intentional violation of the constitutional provision. This I explained in my article. Dr. Thambaya went through, then contacted my dean, that is Professor Nataraja, and said, what is it, your young teacher is trying to be revolutionary and he is trying to rebel, right? Then Professor Nataraja called me and asked, I would like, I have been, because he was also a member of the commission, he asked me, Sir Kumaran, can you come and explain to me why you took up this position? So I took the constitutional copy and showed the difference between shall and may. In the case of shall, president doesn't have any discretion. But in the case of may, he enjoys discretion. He can decide either to refer or not to refer. But in the case of shall, when parliament passes with 2/3 majority, it has to do. And what is the remedy? You don't have any remedy because of 35, Article 35. So only remedy left is Article 37. Then when I explained this, Professor Nataraja said, no, you stand by it, I am standing by you, don't worry. Ignore the comments made by Justice A.W. Thambaya. So that really strengthened and cemented my belief. If I am standing firm on a particular principle, and if I have convinced myself that this is correct, I am not going to change it because somebody is asking me. Somebody who taught me is asking me to change, right? I felt, no, I have been telling one aspect I found in the university system. I've been telling this, being a public law person, I will be holding and expressing views against the government. Sometimes it may be against the party in power. So times are such, immediately they think so-and-so is for the other side. But I don't hold a candle for other side or this side. I am objective. I want to be transparent. I want to stand by certain principles. I have told many times, yes, I was a dean. I am a dean because the constituency, faculty board elected me. They have confidence in me. Because of that, they continue to be. That's what, as the introducer said, for continuously 4 terms, I was unanimously elected. Even 5th term, I declined because I have not enjoyed my sabbatical leave for 16 years. Every 7 years, we can go on 1 year sabbatical leave, but I did not get that. So I have 16 years without sabbatical leave. I said, no, I had to go, and I will be unfair by my wife also, because sabbatical leave means air ticket is given for both of us, right? So I said no, and I will be retiring in 2018, if I don't get in 2012, I will be running out of time to enjoy that. But I have told whether I should continue to be a dean or whether I should continue to be a head is dependent on the vice chancellor or the colleagues in the faculty. But my being in the faculty as teacher cannot be challenged until I reach the age of 65, because I am thorough with my teaching and I am thorough with my examination and other work. So I am not going to be budging my conscience, my principle because of someone. That has been my position then, even now. So one aspect I stood by, and that was because when Professor Nataraja said, no, what you have said, we are writing academic pieces. This is what we expected of academics. And I think Justice Shirani Tilagwarna might know, when I had LLM lectures, I used to criticize if the actions of the government are not acceptable. I will say, but for reasons stated, I will give why I am holding this particular view. So that freedom and independence in the university, because I know I am not going to be shunted to another place. If I am a government servant, I know I could be simply transferred from one place to another, particularly post 1972, because the power to transfer public servants, power until the 17th Amendment was with the cabinet. So as a result, the public servants were at the mercy of the cabinet of ministers, who are politicians, right? But that is not the case with regard to teachers in the university. That is not the case with the administrators in the university. They are transferable, whereas teachers are not transferable. If I am selected and if I am absorbed in the law faculty, until I decide to leave, I have the freedom. Only thing, if I don't discharge my duties properly, then I can be pulled out. But I know I am capable of discharging my duties very well. So this is my experience in the law faculty. And I feel that that should be the case with regard to all people. That is, you uphold your own principles, stand by your own conviction, but the principles must be acceptable in accord with the rule of law, in accord with fundamental rights all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. That's very enlightening and a lovely anecdote also that you shared. Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Jayavikrama has been referred to by at least two of the other panelists with regard to their career experiences. And I know Dr. Jayavikrama, some of the participants or some of those viewing this webinar may not be fully aware that there was some controversy, if I may use the word, with regard to a particular period of time where you played a very influential role from 1970 to 77. And thereafter, there was more controversy with regard to inquiries that were held, which Mr. Palita Fernando touched on. Dr. Jayavikrama, these have been your personal experiences in your career. And if you, I don't want to give the listeners and the viewers history of what these actually were, but I would like you to enlighten us on what it was and how that possibly, what are the lessons that you possibly learned from all those experiences, sir?
I think, sorry, Palita referred to the Special Presidential Commission inquiry and Mr. Naganathan. Now, when I was brought before the Special Presidential Commission, my inquiry began in January 1979, and it went on for 7 months. I had to defend myself, but unfortunately, many of the senior counsel under whom I had worked, in whose chambers I had worked, had one reason or another not to appear for me in the Presidential Commission. Either it was, where they had their reasons. But Mr. Nadesan agreed. At first, he didn't agree because he said that he was a member of the civil rights movement, and the civil rights movement had been critical of the Ministry of Justice in the 77 period, and they all belong to one family, and therefore he has got to stick by what the others have decided. Then I think my wife, who knew him quite well, had a talk with him and reminded him about people's human rights. Anyway, he agreed to appear for me, and he told me that he does not take up cases, but he takes up only causes at that stage of his life. What I found is that it was amazing. I didn't know that that was his strategy or technique. When he was to cross-examine a witness, he had all the questions written down. His address was written down. He told me that he writes down the questions that he intends to ask in cross-examination. At home, he does it because he says he'll be interrupted in court. There'll be objections. He might lose the trend of the questioning. He might forget the next question that he intended to ask. But if it is written down, he says that will not happen. Now his closing address, I don't know for how long it went, must have been about a month. What he did was, we sat from 9 o'clock in the morning till 1:30. I had to go to his place at about 5 o'clock in the evening, and he used to give me written down the next day's address. I had to come home, type it, and then take it to him the next morning. I have with me his full entire address. I hope I can publish it as a sort of tribute to him. It runs into about 375 pages. And he said the advantage of writing it is however much the judges interrupted him or counsel for the other side interrupted him, they will not be able to break his trend of thought. So that's an amazing characteristic that he had. Well, as far as my legal career, all I wanted to do was to practice law. That's all I wanted, not to teach, not to be a civil servant, nothing. But that's not how life turned out. So I was at the bar only for a fairly short time, about 8 years, I think. When I finished my law college exams, I had to do my apprenticeship, and I had lived from about the age of 9 when I joined Royal College till I got married about 19 years later in the home of my mother's brother, who happened to be a lawyer, and in the Attorney General's department. He was the Attorney General. Thereafter, he was the Judge of the Supreme Court. So, and I was sort of immersed in legal matters. He prosecuted in the Satasivam case, or the consultations were at home with medical people and so on. So I followed all that. And when I took my oaths, when I had to do my apprenticeship, I asked, well, he said, I think you should do your apprenticeship under Mr. H.C. de Silva. So I said, but why Mr. H.C. de Silva? Because he does not do that much work in the courts. He said, no, that doesn't matter. You can learn the work later on. But what you will learn from him is the legal ethics, the ethics of the bar. And he said, that's very important. And I think that served me well. And also, since I was living in the home of a judge, during my apprenticeship period, I spent a lot of time in Halsdorf, listening to the assassination case. Thereafter, the coup case arguments, the initial stage when legal arguments were taken on constitutional issues. And then I took my oaths. And then I got my first brief. Family proctor gave me my first brief with a small fee, I think of 50 rupees or something. And it happened to be the day after my oaths. Additional district judges court in Halsdorf. I went with a tremendous degree of trepidation. I don't know what happened. I went there, I went early. The court was empty, but I went and sat there and waited. And then I waited till I saw the judge come. Then I told the Mundli, I'd like to go and speak to the judge. I didn't know whether it was proper or not, but I told him that. Then I went and so the judge called me in, Mr. P.A.D.S. Senaratna. And he asked me, what's the matter? I said, well, I took my oath yesterday and this is my first appearance in court. And he said, well, that's all right. So he asked, what's the matter? What's the matter you're appearing for? What's the case you're appearing in? I said, no, I had to make an application. So I said, he asked me, what's the application? I said, it's an application to ask for a date to find an answer. And he said, oh, that's all right, you'll be okay. And I sat there, and that's how I started my legal career. Now, just to mention, I think you asked me whether there were lessons learned. I think three things I think that I would like to share with you. First, I think a lawyer needs to be resourceful. You know, young lawyers who joined, when we joined the bar, we admitted to the bar, the first set of cases were the assigned cases. So I remember a friend of mine, Anida Vesekara, joined with me, and we used to go from assize court to assize court, Colombo, Nigambo, and Kalutara for assignments. Now you can get the assignment, but counsel would often be retained. And also the fee was, I think, about 50 guineas for the first day of trial, 50 rupees for the first day of trial, and 31 or something for other days. But if you're resourceful, you can get something more. We did research into the court's ordinance, and we found that there was a section in it, Article 3, Section 31, which said that if an accused person is not brought to trial at the first criminal session after he is committed for trial, then he's entitled to bail. So the two of us went from assize court to assize court in the Western Province, applying for bail. I think it was not, apart from the fact that it increased our income, it was also ensured justice for the client because he was able to get out and get his freedom if he had not been brought to trial. The second, so you have to be resourceful, I think. I would recommend that. The second is that one has got to study your brief, but also you have to study the judge. I think it's very important to study the judge. I'll give you one example. There was a very clever judge in the Supreme Court, extremely clever, very sharp. And I know, read his briefs, the appeal briefs before he came to court. So he probably did that the previous day. And he would like to help counsel with some point if the counsel missed it. I had observed this many times. And I remember one particular case where counsel appearing for the appellant was rambling on, but not getting on, not making any progress. Then the judge said, but Mr. So-and-so, haven't you thought of this matter? And immediately he said, my lord, I was just about to come to that. That was the end of it. Because the judge immediately turned on him and said, no, but then he had all the arguments why that would not work. So then I learned that whenever he made that, he tried to be of assistance to counsel, one had to acknowledge it and say that it never struck you. And he is so grateful to your lordship for having brought this matter to my attention. That's the second thing. The third thing is, I would say that I think a lawyer needs also not only to fight for clients in cases where he has been detained, but I think it's necessary also to fight for a cause, because you can make a change. The lawyers can make a change. I'll give you one example. Soon after I took my oaths, 1964, 2 years at the bar, there was another colleague of mine at the bar, Mr. J.D. Asidwadam. He was secretary of the UN Association of Ceylon. I was a treasurer. He was invited by the parent body for a conference to be held in Kuala Lumpur. He was given a prepaid ticket. But at that time, the government had imposed what was called clearance. You could not travel until you got clearance from the Ministry of Defense and External Affairs. So here was innocuous conference in KL, in Kuala Lumpur. He got his prepaid, he applied for clearance. It was refused. So then we thought, okay, let's go and interview the parliamentary secretary to the Ministry of Defense and External Affairs, who happened to be Mr. Felix Dasbandaranaika, went and saw him and said, you know, there's no cost to the government, and this is a legitimate meeting. Why was clearance refused? He said, no, clearance is refused. Would you reconsider? He said, no, it's refused. That's the end of the matter. So we both left his room, and as he was going, as we were leaving, I heard him say, well, if Mr. Nihal Jayavikrama wants to go, he has clearance. So we thought, well, this is something has to be done about it. We decided that we go to courts, and we filed application for a writ of mandamus on the permanent secretary of Defense and External Affairs to grant the clearance. And I must say, a number of lawyers were prepared to appear pro deo, Mr. S.W. Jayavardhana, E.B. Vikramanayaka. We went to courts and we got a good bench. The H.L. Silva appeared for the Crown. He had no argument, nothing. He was asked a simple question: what is the legal provision that enables the Minister of Defense and External Affairs to gives the power to issue clearance? And he had nothing to show. It didn't take. I think that the court postponed the case put it off on a Friday to Monday, and on Monday the judge said, "Well, if I expect you to have granted the clearance when we resume on Monday," and HL came and said, yes, clearance had been granted. And I think the court was very firm about it. But a month later, A.C. Gunavardhana applied for clearance and he was refused. The case, we filed another case. On that occasion, the court, different bench, said, all right, we have gone through this matter before. Now we are ordering the permanent secretary and the control of exchange to pay the costs from their personal, on a personal basis, not government money. Shortly after, the government announced that they are now abandoned this clearance requirement. So I think the lawyers have a part to play in matters of that nature. It may not be, you had to create that case now. We didn't, there were no clients as such, but we wanted to take up that issue. Those are three things that I want to say, that personal lessons that that I would recommend and suggest.
Thank you, Dr. Jayavikrama. Very enlightening and very interesting stories. Thank you very much. I'd like to now proceed to my third round of questions. And you have each of you have spoken about your personal experiences and what lessons you learned in your career progression. You have touched on what I'm going to ask you. Possibly you have touched on this in your previous responses, but I would like to give some highlighting, so to speak, on your responses to this question, because it will possibly be some mentoring towards the younger generation as well. My question is, if there is, what is the personal attribute that you would credit? What is the personal attribute that you would credit towards rising in your chosen careers? I will give you some perspective. Each of you have had colleagues or peers of equal level and standing alongside you, but above them and beyond them, you have been able to reach the pinnacles of your career. So in looking back, if there is a personal character attribute that you could credit for this, we would like to hear about that. Might I first pose that question to Madam Shirani, Justice Shirani Gunavardhana?
Okay, so I'll take it as from the point of my career as I entered. I mean, clearly I was being discriminated. I was told I would be got rid of in so many months. And before I came, my father had clearly told me, remember, you're now an officer of state. You're not an officer of government. In other words, you now have nothing to do with Lalita Turathan. He's an officer of government. So you're an officer of state. And the more I looked into it, I mean, it was hard work. There was undoubtedly, there was no bathrooms at that time. The men used to use the back wall of the courts, and the women had different paradigm. So you never drank water, even though your trip would go, you'd come back late in the evening. So yeah, there were a lot of physical hardships. But that passion, the passion of loving your work, every second of your work, enjoy it. Don't have ambition. Ambition is such a small thing. Don't have ideas that you're going to make money. That's really ground zero. Have your dreams, have your aspirations, and above all, know that in this game, the most important person who comes before you is the litigant. And the litigant can be poor or rich or, anybody in the country, from the highest to the lowest. There is no locuminis supodimis. Because of the privilege of our power, of our positions, we wield a lot of power. And power is not like, I always say this, power is not like a necklace one puts on, where one can, adorn yourself and look and feel, mighty, and everybody are subjects below you. It is not that. Power is given to you because there is a very important concept that underlies it, which is contained in the Charter of Human Rights. All people are equal. So whether you're a minority, and I know every minority person, every person who will be discriminated by words, by snickers, by, just people making really cruel remarks about you, about your race, about your religion, about your disability, about the difference of sexual orientation, about so many things. Those are the dredges of society. We must learn to live in this higher paradigm where equality is our lodestone. So what is equality? Equality is everybody who is born in any position, in any religion, anywhere. If you're at the top of that establishment or at the bottom of it, we're all equal. What do you mean by equality? Equality is that there is, actually, if you look for equality, there's no real definition. But what it gives you is that you have independence, you have autonomy, you have dignity, and you have respect. So just because you belong to a category, some category, let's take, I'm taking an example from outside because I think then it'll be a broad parallel. The white American, the white rich Western person. Just because you're rich and you have money and you have position and power, you cannot, those are not privileges and entitlements that are yours. Privilege and entitlement comes if you work hard for something, you study, you pass your exams. Of course, you're entitled to be happy. You're entitled to thereafter progress. But if not, privileges and entitlements don't come simply by birth. Why? Because we're all equal. And the Haramanis and the Juanis in the courts is who must be the center of your court. You must never, ever. And I love the core values, and that's why I've enjoyed my work on integrity so much. The Bangalore principles say this. Recognize independence, because that is part of equality. If you don't have equality, and believe you me, I have gone through this, I have perhaps, had silly, petty, the ridiculous, where I'd get when I joined the department, somebody had sent me a feminine women's towel in the post to my, the officer who handled administration, a wonderful man, Srinath Pereira, who never talked about it, but just told me. I'd get to use condom in the mail every 1st of the year, January. Later, I knew who was doing it. He was an older man, and I couldn't believe somebody would have waste time doing something so that was a ridiculous, but sometimes it's the sublime. It's the insidious way in which you demote somebody, where you have these layers and you become sycophants to people who think you have power. But what we must do is use the power, everybody in position. If you have gained it through hard work and if you have been privileged to acquire it, is to use that power to bring, because if you analyze human rights, you will find that a country's strength is its civility, is its the power that everybody is happy because they have got dignity and respect. Everybody feels equal. So then you're not discriminated. then there is no one person of a higher and somebody lower, because always the lower will be oppressed by a higher person. You have, I mean, a minority, you will be oppressed by the majority. And what does that result in? It will result always in a feeling of pain and anger, which festers, results in violence. 30-year war. What was it? Because we didn't embrace equality. And how do you do it practically? You have, in every committee you set up, every place, have inclusivity and diversity. That is so. Bar association, do you have women? The population is 50-50. Where are your women? They are just there to, organize. Where are your women leading? Go back and analyze them. Where are the women who are represented in parliament, they give you, they have such a different ways of thinking. And I'm so happy now you have these women at provincial level who come up. And one meeting I went for, and they were talking, and they said, every industry that brings revenue is 90% run by women. But they don't have a say in how that money is spent. Because they would say, prioritize health, prioritize education, prioritize things right, stop the sexual harassment. And now there's words for it, sextortion, where bribery is instead of money, you're asking for sexual favors. I mean, is this a civilized society? So where you have this kind of inequalities, you don't have equality. And where there's no equality, there is no justice. And there never will be a peaceful community of people. So it's so important for us to take a step back and say, my goodness, we have everything. What need is love, compassion, to see everybody is equal, to identify the Haramanis and the Joannis' needs. What does Joannis need? Do you know that your taps, look at the electricity bills that are being paid by, especially the upper, I'm talking of the upper middle class and the wealthy. That is enough to electrify all the villages. Wouldn't it be wonderful if little children didn't have to sit with, the little, the kuppi lamps and get burnt, and, they wouldn't have to do that. Look at the violence in your home. What are you talking about? Civilized is culture. These are not Western ideologies. This is our men and women and girls and boys. Don't forget, there's sexual harassment of both men and women, of boys and girls, because today that becomes a video that can then be put on the internet, and you can earn through cryptocurrencies. It's going beyond the law, and we don't address it. We are not addressing the big problem we have about gaming. We are now trying to give single parents adoption of children. Do you know that one of the ways of trafficking of little children is selling of organs? This is a huge business. It's trafficking. If they take the children out, what is the control we have after there are foreign adoptions? How do we patrol this? Where are the checks and balances? But it is being done with absolute genuineness. And to me, that is what is sad. Most of the people who are trying to bring about influence, where they have power, they want to do it, and they say, if they could only say nation before me, if we could say the litigant before our pomposity and our arrogance in our courthouses, and they're all treated, even under cross-examination, with dignity and respect. That humanity is protected in our courthouse, I do believe that we will achieve what most countries are striving to achieve today. And that courts that are just and fair. A country where it is just and fair. And it is the poor, the marginalized, the discriminated are embraced. And we use that power. We distribute that necklace to them so that they can come to a position of equality, to deserve our respect, to give them respect and dignity in their place. And that is the importance of equality. I mean, often people say, oh, you fight for women's rights. No, I am fighting for equality, for any inequality that I see. Because at the end of that rainbow, one does not find justice where there's inequality. And that inequality is everywhere. And as Justice Cardo also said somewhere in the latest day, we are all prejudiced. We all have our own prejudices and beliefs and myths about it. And, you know, oh, this is what the right thing. We have not studied. You know, it is like bufo melanopticus, which is the science students will know, a big fat frog in a well. We don't realize that there is a whole dimension of spirituality, of compassion, embracing of those who are lesser, because our civilized, whether we are civilized or not, is not judged by the rich and the powerful and the privileged, but how much equality does that poorest person, the person who is physically or mentally challenged, have as a person? What are their rights? What are their guarantees? That is what it must be. And
so I think our greatest challenge, Madam, as you very so aptly and with such clarity put it, is that if we do not aspire towards equality, justice is just a utopia.
No, and we not because of course the Constitution says, everybody will tell you, Constitution says all are equal before the law. That's a pomposity we say from the bench and from the, you know, from the bar or wherever. Because the reality, we have to move from formal equality to substantive equality, where it is the real life experience of everybody in this nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Extremely obliged by a wonderful response and something to really think about, quite a bit to think about. May I now pose a question to Dr. Jayavikrama. Dr. Jayavikrama, you have had a career where you've reached the pinnacle and also many experiences, or if we can call it multifaceted experiences, in progressing in your career. Is there anything that you would put down? I know you did give 3 lessons which you think are very important towards achieving success in the legal sphere, but anything that you would attribute towards your personal characteristics that you would credit as a personal character trait in reaching the pinnacles that you have, sir?
I think it's que sera, sera. Whatever will be, that is story of my life. Because as I said, what I wanted to be was a practicing lawyer and nothing else. But that was limited in time to about 8 years when I was asked to come join the Ministry of Justice as permanent secretary and by a new prime minister. And I asked, well, what am I supposed to do for the next 5 years, appoint justices of the peace? She said, no. When you were secretary of the Bar Council, I was secretary of the Bar Council for 2 years. During that period, you have been complaining that nothing has been done in the legal sphere for nearly a century, no reforms whatsoever, whereas so many other reforms are undertaken in other areas like labor legislation and so on. So now I'm giving you a chance. Come and do what you want to do. And she said, you can have a free hand because in Parliament, she had a majority. So then I found myself in the Ministry of Justice, and I think we did address the issues that faced the legal profession at that time very comprehensively, because when I went there, with my objective was to change the system and bring it into the 20th century, because laws, the criminal procedure, the civil procedure, the court's ordinance, they were all 19th century, 1880, 1879. So what we did was change the system, and but it nothing. I didn't go there with ideas of my own. There had been commissions of inquiry appointed during previous governments. Justice Naganathan chaired the Civil Courts Commission. Justice Grayson chaired the Criminal Courts Commission. Sir Alan Rose chaired the Courts Commission, Court Reform Commission. So we made use of all those reports, then made contact with the Law Reform Commission in Australia, Law Reform Commission in Canada, the British Justice Section, International Commission of Jurists, and got many ideas from them and incorporated all that to try to bring the legal system to the the latter part of the 20th century. And that's what we did. But clearly, it upset the legal profession. It upset the judiciary. The Chief Justice told me quite clearly, he said, I'm not going to conform. I'm not going to permit certain provisions of that law to be applied in my courts, like limiting addresses to 30 minutes, like what they do in the United States Supreme Court, followed by written submission, that kind of thing. So at the end of 7 years, I found myself out of the ministry and not able to come back to the bar because the legal profession was very unhappy about what one of its own had done. And when it ended up, I didn't want to be an academic at all. That's the last thing I want to go back to university. But I ended up going to London and doing a PhD in a new subject that was emerging, international human rights law. I never wanted to go and teach law, but that's what I went and did for the next 14 years in Hong Kong and Canada. And then then a friend of mine who was working in the Communist Secretariat said, you know, it's about time that you came down to earth from those ivory towers. And I ended up at Transparency International, where we found that is an organization that was trying to find ways of combating corruption in different spheres. And we were getting information from World Bank and so on of surveys that had been done in different parts of the world, in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa, of public perception surveys. In all those surveys, clearly they found that the police were regarded as the most corrupt institution. And next to the police, the judiciary was regarded as the most corrupt institution. So we decided to do something about it. And at Transparency International, we began a project. I found the funding, invited about, when you deal with the judiciary, you have to be very careful because they're very sensitive judges about their own profession. So we invited about 10 chief justices from common law countries to present to them this problem and tell them what do you think should be done about it. At that stage, Transparency decided that it's not worth spending time on judiciary, banking sector is more important. And therefore, this work went on to the UN. And we had a meeting in the early part of I think it was 2000, where we had a group of chief justices. We told them, this is the problem. This is what the people think about you. And they then emphasized the need for a code of judicial conduct. And I worked on that. I've been working on that since then. So we now have a code of judicial conduct, which is endorsed by the United Nations, approved by the General Assembly, which is now the global standard. And we have a commentary on that. We have implementation measures. So that's the work that I've been doing. So it's not something that I want to do, but it just went, as I said, this case said, it was beyond my control. And what is unfortunate here is that we are one of the few countries in the world today where the judiciary has not adopted a code of conduct. We don't have one. Actually, there are two things that we worked on. There's also a code of conduct for court officials, court staff, and also one for prosecutors, but we have not adopted any of those. So that's sad because I've spoken to 2, 3, 4 of our chief justices from time to time. They said, yes, that's very good. Can I have a copy of the Bangalore Principles? But it never happened. Nothing progressed beyond that. So I wish sometime very soon that we would do that, because from right across from the Pacific to the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, even I think all over Eastern Europe, all those countries have adopted codes of judicial conduct, but we haven't. So that's so my experience at the bar is rather limited to about 8 years, although that's where I thought I would spend the rest of my life, but that didn't happen. So it's que sera, whatever will be, will be.
I suppose the most profound character attribute would be to be able to take it in stride. And then
I think you have resilience. I think it's necessary to do that because sometimes you can't control events, so that you let things go and make the best use of it. It's
very
no
much like what, that's so. Thank you, sir. Very much like what Mr. Palita Fernando said that it's not just only parenting, it's also destiny. So I'd like to pose the question to Mr. Palita Fernando, President's Council, as to what he would attribute that as his most profound character trait that helped him rise to the pinnacle, sir.
Shall I should say that our seniors and the judges before whom we appeared guided us properly. The very strict judges, Justice Shayhan Gunavardhana and I both prosecuted before Justice Bandaranaike, the Palita research. And they were very strict judges. We had to know our brief. And if they would pose questions on the bench and we did not know the answer or did not give an answer that is acceptable, then the Attorney General, we may be reported to the Attorney General. So we knew that we had to do very, very hard work. So hard work, I took Mr. Naganathan's advice and I always went to court ready. I was prepared with my brief. I think that was one reason why there were no complaints against me to any other judges or to my supervising officers. So that helped me to go through the Attorney General's department. But once I joined the unofficial bar, I have been there for 8 years now, yes, almost 8 years. I think Nihal Jayavikrama, Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama was also there for some time. I can remember, sir, you defended an accused called Michael Bass. Is that correct? I think.
Yes.
Memory serves me correct.
That's correct.
Successfully defended it. So then, like that in the unofficial bar, what I think is that we have to be very, very careful when we are in the unofficial bar. In the official bar, it did not matter whether we won the case or not. We had to do our best. Whatever the result is, we're not interested. If we have done our best, then that is all that is expected by the Attorney General. We are not judged by the convictions that we secure. No, we have to be a fair prosecutor. I can still remember, and that I consider a compliment to when I was prosecuting before Justice Bandaranaike, one lawyer said, a very senior lawyer said, this is not prosecuting, this is persecuting. Mr. Bandaranaike stopped him immediately and said, so and so you can tell that to any counsel, but not to the state counsel. I consider that the biggest compliment that was ever paid to me by a judge. In the unofficial bar, I don't want to take much time because I think we are now running out of time by Shayhan. But then I will quote the words of Lord Denning. Lord Denning said, you have to be honest to your clients. You have to be honest to court. Above all, you have to be honest to your conscience. I think that is the key to success. And I followed it. I'm happy now sitting here and looking back. I'm happy that I did not ever do anything against my conscience. Now, I may just refer to an anecdote. A senior lawyer, they say, once was addressing court and they told court, Lord, during my 50 years of career at the bar, I have never consciously misled court. And then an equally senior lawyer had turned to his juniors and said, I never knew that this man was unconscious for 50 years. So that is something we have just heard. Anyway, with all that, I must congratulate the Bar Association for this organizing this. And I was privileged to be with Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama, Justice Shayhan Gunavardhana, and Professor. All of them have been my very good friends. We are, of course, other two of my seniors, Professor Kumaran, of course, who worked with me quite closely when I was Attorney General. So once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I wish you all the best. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Fernando. Thank you very much. So honesty and hard work for which there is no substitute. Your wonderful character traits. Thank you so much. Professor Naganathan Silva Kumaran, I would like to pose that question also to you, sir. Of course, you had peers, you had colleagues who were on equal level, possibly with you in your different in your progression during your career. But what do you think that you, looking back, would attribute to being your defining character trait that helped you to rise to the pinnacle of your career, sir?
Thank you. With regard to academic matters, it is pure hard work. There is no substitute for academic excellence and acceptance without doing hard work. You must be committed researcher, committed to follow the scruples or the rigors of research. That is one. But when it comes to academic cum administrator, that is holding the position of headship or dean, becoming a dean or acting vice chancellor, I follow the principle of participation, consultation, inclusion. I don't make decision on my own. Whatever the decision a faculty has to take, I will consult all my colleagues and I will try to convince them and make them to be part of the decision-making process. So that when it comes to decision is made, they themselves will come to defend if some challenge is being made, because they don't feel that somebody else has made a decision and thrust on them. They themselves are part and parcel of decision-making process. So that found me to be in the good books of them. I could simply carry them because I will convince them. Of course, my decision must be rational, reasonable, and fair. So those things. But when it comes to my work, I was there in the Human Rights Commission for 6 years. During that time only, I had the opportunity of going through petitions filed in the commission. And there I learned a different trait. That is, whatever we teach, we need to internalize those teaching among ourselves. So it is like walking the talk. Just teaching is not. And I would remember two individuals, that is late R.K.W. Gunasekaran, who simply made the point, what is equality? Equality is absence of prejudice, absence of bias. If you can consider that you are not going to be prejudiced, you are not going to be biased, then surely, so I used to tell, the human life is such, when we are in office mode, that is from 8 to 5, we had to be detached from the world and we need to see all on merit and merit alone. We had to be rational. But when we are at our home front, that is 4:15 to following morning 8, we had to be attached to our family. So this is changing our lifestyle from being attached to detached, from seeing things irrationally to rationality. Is the difficult thing people may fail because they don't see, yes, in the office I may have friends, but you need to go through on merit. No prejudice whether he is my friend, he is not my friend. In fact, there have been instances where I have told some petitioners, the way they talk, they may not deserve a relief, but the fact that they are entitled for fundamental rights, their right is violated, however bad you talk, I am granting you relief. Now, that is the difference between being prejudiced and not being prejudiced. That one aspect. And also, second thing, there are people who may come and try to upset you. Immediately it starts ringing in my head. I should not lose my cool. If I lose my cool, the person who is seated opposite to me has won over half the battle. I should always keep my cool and listen to him. If he or she deserves certain thing, then accept it. Even if you have made a mistake, accept your mistake and correct it. But if that is not the case, very politely tell why you are not in a position to. This is the way I handle the students. And these are the traits which made me to steer the ship during my time in the faculty and even outside in commissions and other boards safely.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. It was very enlightening and very inspiring, and also gave us an insight as to how we should aspire towards diminishing our prejudices. And if without that, we will not be able to achieve a sense and an act of equality, if I may use the word. I believe we have run a little bit over time, but that I'm sure, as Justice Gunavardhana said at the beginning, these things can be spoken of for hours, but unfortunately, we do have to end the webinar now, and I am extremely grateful to Justice Shirani Tilakavardhana, to Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama, to President's Counsel, Mr. Palita Fernando, and to Professor Naganathan Silva Kumaran for being so cooperative with me and for enlightening our viewers with their wonderful experiences, their inspiring achievements. And please do, if I may challenge you, please do continue to inspire. Thank you very much. Over to you, Josh.
Thank you, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've certainly heard and learned from the very best. Thank you to our distinguished panelists for that enlightening and inspiring session this evening. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today, and for also giving us a little insight into your lives. I'm certain that our viewers tuning in today gain something that would no doubt prove to be valuable in their lives and careers. Now, I invite Mr. Pasindu Silva, the convener of the Seminars Committee of the BASL and the Assistant Secretary of the BASL, to speak a few words. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Conducting 100 webinars involved a tremendous effort. And in the concluding remarks, I believe it is my duty to thank all those who have helped to achieve this. I would like to thank Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, the Secretary of the BASL and the Chairman of the Seminars Committee, who was instrumental in initiating the webinar series. His meticulous approach made the webinar series go from strength to strength. I would like to thank the previous management committee of the BASL, headed by Mr. Kalinga Indatissa PC, for all the assistance given. My deep appreciation also extends to the members of the present management committee, Mr. Salih Piris PC, the president of the BASL, Mr. Anura Nadgoda PC, the deputy president of the BASL, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, the secretary, and Mr. Rajin Pereira, the treasurer, for all the guidance and assistance given to make this webinar series a success. Also, my gratitude goes to Mr. Pandula Banyarachi, Mr. Oshan Uberatna, Ms. Anne Devananda, and Ms. Nikini Mapitagama, who are the conveners of the Seminars Committee. I would like to thank our compeers, Shayhan Gunavardhana, Uma Vijaysurya, Shania Kure, Tushangi Atapattu, Pasinduni Fernando, Tanuja Migahavatta, Senuri Munasinghe, Divya Arulpananthan, Josh Surendrajan, Sasmini Bandara, Isuri Jayavardhana, Daminda Vijayavardhana, Senal Matugama, Kini Mapitagama, Samantha Sudeshpriya, Shahar Hera, Nirmal Purnajit, Chandana Boteju, Nandana Kumara, R. Elil Molly, Prashadini Udekumar, Nasiha Safia, and Takshashini Raj Prakash for all their assistance. I would also like to specially thank all our resource persons who have devoted their time to share their valuable knowledge and experience with us. I would also like to thank Ms. Suren Samarasekar, Mr. Sarang Hettiarachi, and the staff of the BASL for all the assistance given. I thank all the viewers of this webinar series whose participation and interest shown was vital to drive this webinar series forward. I would once again like to thank the expert panelists of today's Centenary webinar, Justice Shirani Tilakavardhana, Dr. Nihal Jayavikrama, Mr. Palita Fernando, President's Counsel, Professor N. Silva Kumaran, for their valuable contribution in this momentous occasion. I would especially like to thank Mr. Shayhan Gunavardhana, the moderator of today's webinar, who has assisted us right throughout this webinar series. Thank you very much, and good night to all of you.
Thank you to our viewers for tuning in today. Till we meet next time, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.